Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking about the wonderful season 3 of Hacks. I am joined today by co-creator, co-showrunner, executive producer, writer, and director, as well as actor Paul W. Downs, along with cast member Megan Stalter. And Paul, in starting with you, I thought it was so beautiful and interesting and complex the way that you and the rest of the team broke Ava and Deborah apart and then brought them back together this season. And obviously, we've seen them go through cycles of this and elements of it, but this one was so much deeper and cut so much further, which also created an even bigger obstacle of how do we actually bring them back together in a way that feels genuine, because they both have so much hatred for each other at the beginning in those first few episodes. And so I wanted to ask about the way in which you really figured out how to solve that obstacle so it felt completely genuine that both of these characters would realize how much they needed and wanted each other.
Yeah, I mean, it was we really and we always do this that we want to reset the dynamic so that we still have the grist because the grist is the DNA of the show. And yet we don't ever want to repeat ourselves or do the same thing. And for the actors, we wanted to give Jean Smart and Hannah Einbinder the chance to stretch and do a different gear than they'd done before. So the blackmail, the betrayal, obviously for someone like Deborah, who is a mob boss, is like not having loyalty is the worst thing in the world. So we needed to treat that groundedly, which meant they were going to have sort of more intense friction than they've ever had. But you're right, it was really challenging then to say, okay, if we're going to start from this place of betrayal, how do we get them back together and how do we earn that? And how do we not do it the same way? Because it was really important to us, again, not to do something that the viewer had seen before. And it's not like, oh, in episode two, they find something out, but by episode three, Deborah's decided to forgive her, though sue her. Like we've done certain things and we didn't ever want it to feel formulaic. So getting to episode six, where Deborah literally throws herself into the freezing ocean to save Ava, this like act of service, took us a long time to figure out what it would take for Ava to see Deborah do that was in a way as self-sacrificial as what Ava does when she blackmails Deborah, because she actually handcuffs herself to her mentor, to her friend, in a way that's both self-serving but also altruistic. So it took a lot of thought. We really gave ourselves a big challenge.
Is that why it also had to be her second favorite fur that she was wearing in the scene as well?
That was a thing too. We were like, well, she's also got to destroy something she loves. So it's her second favorite fur. Glad it's not the first.
And Megan, in the way that you play Kayla, I mean, right from those very first episodes in season one, you've always played this character which has these larger than life elements, but you bring so much humanity and so much heart and so much emotion to it. And it almost feels like the writing this season has really allowed even more of that depth and that humanity in terms of who Kayla is, because so much of it comes to the surface because of her friendship and her relationship with Jimmy. And so I wanted to ask you about how the writing this season really allowed you to lean more into those aspects of playing her.
Thank you. That's so sweet. And I feel the same. Like, I was so happy to see that in this season, like, she kind of gets to step up and Jimmy, like, they both need each other. And I think when Jimmy goes after her at the airport, I think that meant so much to her. So you got to see that, wait, Jimmy cares so much about her too. I think their friendship has grown so much. I mean, in season one, of course, Kayla's always been obsessed with Jimmy, but to see that he's been vulnerable with her, that's some of my favorite stuff to do in the show is like show those real moments. And when like Kayla's bully was mean to her and Jimmy steps up, it makes me cry every time when he sticks up for her. So it's been really amazing to like see their friendship grow because they really ride for each other.
They do.
I also love the way that the show creates these very specific love languages between characters and between Jimmy and Kayla. The way that they have their very specific way of showing each other that they care. Jimmy having the sign at the end of the season where it's her
Oh,
name first, and he knows how important that will be to her and that it means more to her than to him. And there's almost this kind of like rom-com narrative between the two of them. How did you find that their love language to each other really grew a lot this season, even down to the fact that we hear them say "I love you" in conversation a lot?
I know they do say I love you. I love that moment. That is such a cute
mm,
moment because they do like to spend time together and
mm,
they're very much family and they care a lot about each other and they know that they're better together. I think even though Jimmy is sometimes can be flummoxed, like he realizes the value that Kayla brings to their management company. And this season Kayla also defends Jimmy. She comes to his
mhm.
defense in a very similar way. uh, to Jimmy's defending her last season with Deborah and Ava. And actually, I that is one of my favorite scenes Meg's ever done. Her like confronting Deborah and Ava, sticking it to Jean Smart. First of all, she is so funny, but it is like grounded and heartfelt and really good. I love that scene. It's such a good scene.
Well, I love this scene where Jimmy gets upset that Kayla's going to the movies and didn't invite him because it does show. It's almost like in the last season we ended with Jimmy giving in to her and being like, okay, like I need you. And then this season it's like you're seeing the comfort of like, oh, they actually do spend a lot of time together willingly. Like
Yeah.
he literally like gets jealous and wants to go to the movie with her. Like even if she annoys him, like there's a like, yeah, we're family. Like, and I think you finally see the full comfort of and like being like him giving in to her. And that's why I could see them being married one day.
Good.
Season 5. They also have this commonality because they grew up in very similar bubbles within the industry, and both of their dads, have similar positions in the industry too. But at the same time, they have very different relationships with their dad. We kind of get the impression that Jimmy probably has a much healthier relationship with his dad than maybe Kayla has with hers from some of what we see. And I was interested in how, for both of you, that creates this commonality and connection. But then at the end of the day, because they have different experiences, they also have their own trajectories within it as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think they're both like LA kids. They grew up in LA. They really understand LA. And even though they're both children of successful managers, they have very different approaches, both to management and also how they either exploit or try and hide their privilege. Like I think Jimmy wants to prove
Yeah.
himself, doesn't ever want his name to precede him, and I think Kayla's a little bit more like, if you got it, flaunt it, use it. And it's true, it is an asset in many instances to like have that network and also that like knowledge. So yeah, but they also, I do think that's something that I love unearthing as we go is like their shared history. We find out last season that, or we find out in season 2, Kayla says he babysat me and changed my diapers. And then Jimmy's like, I never changed your diapers. You're like 2 years younger than me or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's just like hearing their history. Also, last season we heard that Jimmy gave her tennis lessons one summer, and it was like one of her favorite memories of being
It's sweet.
like one of our favorite summer memories. So we do hear about these things that they do. I think they probably had like, you know, sometimes busy parents and they bonded.
Hmm. Well, it also is interesting because Jimmy kind of I think like you would want to make your father proud, but I think Kayla actually doesn't really care about her father being proud anymore. I
Yeah.
think she cares if Jimmy's proud of her. And I think that Jimmy, I think, also wants to make Kayla proud now, where I don't think he realized before. But
Yeah.
it's kind of sweet that they found family in each other because they always kind of had that anyway.
And with Jimmy as well, there's that aspect of, he used to kind of really roll his eyes at a lot of things that Kayla was doing. And then he realized that she just has this different approach and this kind of very unique brilliance to a lot of it. But also, there's ways in which he can use the fact that she's very comfortable to be direct and say things out loud and be the bull in a china shop in a way that he's not as naturally comfortable. And so, how do you feel like that they've kind of like really recalibrated their rhythm together where, he's happy to let her take the lead in moments where he feels more comfortable stepping back almost.
Yeah, I think it's like he is so lucky to have this sort of yin to his yang because her approach is so different, her style is so different, but also, she makes her outside of the box ideas are so valuable. She signs this dog that then like launches a Lassie reboot, and it's like a huge windfall for the company. So, and that's something he wouldn't even approach because he has more fear. I think Kayla, like Meg, is very fearless and very free. And that's like a huge asset, especially when you're trying to make your dreams come true in Los Angeles, whether you're an artist or you're a representative of an artist. I think like it's true for anybody in this town.
And with Kayla as well, it's almost like she can have certain conversations with Jimmy in her head without needing to have them in actuality. When she brings Dance Mom into the mix, it's like she knows that he's going to push back on it. She's going to have to explain it. So it's easier just to be like, she's in the waiting room on Zoom, like, boom, you're late for your meeting. Like,
Yeah.
here we go, because she knows that he'll come around. And so do you find that she's kind of just like preempting some of those things and jumping forward a few steps this season?
She's able to push him just enough to help him fly.
That's right.
And he helps her and he saves her when she's gonna fall. It's so
Yeah, that's
sweet.
sweet. I love that.
But she's able to encourage him because they're so different. Like they're so different that I mean, he helps ring her in, she helps open him up, and they are literally gonna have a kid in the next season.
It is the classic
Manifesting.
it is the classic odd couple, you know? It's like a classic comedy duo odd couple dynamic, and it's so fun to play. And it's so fun to write. It's just like, you know, and even in moments where we're like not exactly sure of where like the button to a scene is, we know that Meg will also help deliver one that is like sometimes like Kayla, even better than we could have imagined because it's so outside the box. So
Well, it's literally a perfect script and perfect people that are surrounding us. I mean, it's the most
I have a
easy thing in the
gun. I have
world.
a gun. I'm pushing the barrel of a gun into it.
It's so easy to improv with Paul that it's like makes me feel free to be able to pop off
Well, and not
because
everybody,
you pop me off.
yeah,
Because
but not
we're all
everybody,
popping off.
not everybody can do it though, because you know, to improvise like well in a comedy that doesn't derail you or like take time away or like not work with the game of the scene it is a skill and it's hard and Meg is so good at it. It's like it's very rare to be as good as she is.
Yeah. One of the things that's kind of always a little bit fun to watch with Jimmy as well is especially with Deborah when he goes into conversations with her and what he is going in with as his objective to the conversation very often changes based on what she's saying or how she's feeling that way. You know, or just the way that he'll be like, you have the most beautiful armpits. You know, he has to kind of like kowtow and compliment and adjust to her world. And so how do you find the ways in which you want Jimmy to really go in with an idea, but then very much quickly change what that is depending on Deborah's day or mood?
Yeah, I mean it's like it's a very rich dynamic to have somebody who really cares about his client, really cares about Deborah, but he's, you know, he inherited Deborah as a client from his father, and so he's always going to be a little afraid, you know, and like he's going to always walk on eggshells a bit, especially with someone like Deborah, because when you're dealing with a diva, you never know what you're going to get. So he is actually quite good, I think, at adjusting, reading a room, spinning things in the way that he ultimately can help a client get to where he needs them to go. Not always. Sometimes it takes more than just simple adjusting, but yeah, luckily in those moments he has Kayla.
Kayla, sorry, not Megan. Megan, I also love with Kayla
Yeah, to
the
live.
constant references to gorilla mode for her, you know,
Mm.
and there's kind of how much gorilla mode is she going to bring in any given situation, depending on what she frustrated about, what she annoyed about in this very instance. And how do you find the balance of how gorilla mode you want to allow her to be at any moment in scenes?
Well, I think, well, you guys are so amazing. Lucia, Jen, everyone is so amazing about telling you, okay, like let's pull back the gorilla mode or let's go a little bit more gorilla mode. And also, you guys are so genius about gorilla mode because
That
that
was found.
we found gorilla mode and then you went back and wrote so many jokes in about gorilla mode throughout the show.
I think the line was something like, "I'm about to go beast mode" or something.
Yeah, something like
And
that.
then
Yeah.
Meg said, "I'm about to go full gorilla mode." And then we were like, "Oh, great." Knowing the season and the story of this of Kayla sort of getting a little bit drunk on power, we were like, "Great, now we're gonna put in half gorilla mode." We're gonna like actually get to tease out gorilla mode. But gorilla mode was so much funnier than beast mode. It was so
Hey, I
fun.
loved beast mode.
No,
You, as my scene partner, encouraged me to go
I
gorilla
was like,
mode.
"This is correct. This is
Yeah,
so
you
funny."
encouraged me.
And I broke a lot in that scene, I will say. I did laugh.
I did too, because your reactions and that whole scene is so
We
funny.
should actually do a cut. We should release a cut because there's one moment where she goes, "I forgot my keys," and she comes back, which is in the show. But then she grabbed a pair of scissors and walks out with a pair of scissors in a very menacing way, and it was so funny. I think
Scary.
ultimately it wasn't in the edit because it was a little scary.
It's like, what is she gonna do? Cut
But it was so
someone
funny. It was so
the
funny.
throat. It was scary, violent. The scissors were violent. It looked like I was
They
gonna
were
kill my
violent, but
dad.
they really cracked me up.
Yeah. Okay.
And Paul, with Jimmy, there's so much emotional hurt that he feels when he has no idea that Ava and Deborah have made up, because they very much put him in the center of a lot of their conflict as well. And he was trying to mediate the best he could. I even love the detail of he's had the restaurant remove their knives when he goes to lunch with them because he doesn't know if they're going to literally stab each other at that point. And I was interested in just how you really shaped that arc of the way that it's not something that feels like just business, like it feels very personal and very hurt to him and causes such a huge crash out.
Well, yeah, I mean, the show's really about your work wives, about the people that you work with, and like your chosen family, who are your like collaborators. And so not only is he put in between them when they have friction, which he said he'd never do again after his parents' divorce because it almost destroyed him, but he also then is left out of when they've made up. And after all of the sweating and all of the stressing and all of the like nightmares he's been having about their rift, for them not to clue him into that is really hurtful. And it also helps drive him to the point we get him to, because he has a break this season. You know, he like actually gets driven to the brink. And we felt like that was happening to everybody in a way, that doing something on this level, like launching a late night show, mounting it, the amount of pressure and the amount of eyeballs that are on that is really intense. And so rather than it just be a professional burden, we did want it to have an emotional and personal impact on him to drive him to that point of, well, driving into the middle of the highway in a golf cart.
And even just with bringing up the point about things that remind him of his parents' divorce and that place that he felt like he was in as a kid, I thought one of the moments that was so sweet was when Kayla notices and kind of like knows him well enough to just be like, I know that this moment is reminding you of how you felt when your parents got divorced and the way that they really left you out of that situation. And did you find that there were a lot of instances throughout the season where it just allowed Kayla to have more of that self-awareness and to be more attuned to his emotions and how he's feeling?
Well, I think that I just love when there's a line like that because it's shows you just how much she knows him and that he knows her and how close they really are. And it is like I think that Kayla could come across like in her own world, but she actually is very in tune to Jimmy's world and well, he is her world. So it's like she actually is very like that's endearing of her to point
Yeah.
out. Like, but I think like in the first season you don't like you get a little hint of okay, she's like not that great of assistant. She's very funny and she's like very positive. But then you get to see so much of her heart throughout the seasons and
Yeah.
it's really sweet. And I love how close they
And
are.
she is really wise. Like
Yeah.
there's this thing of like, you know, the jester that actually is very wise and like advises the king or whatever. And I think that Kayla has this thing where she says to Jimmy, you know, I love you, but you don't love yourself. And there is a degree to which Jimmy's not putting his own feelings first. He's really putting his clients before his own feelings. So she really does see him, you know, she really gets him in a way that not a lot of people do. So it is a sweet intimacy they have.
Paul, also in talking a little bit more about the writing and the late night of it all this season, it's so fascinating to step back and realize that you and the rest of the team basically went through the entire development phase of creating a late night show. What feels like it would work? How does it feel like ultimately it's going to be successful once it's very true to Ava and Deborah as people and it feels more authentic to them? And what was that like for you getting to really kind of go through all the steps and all the processes of what it would actually be like to create a late night show?
Well, it gives you huge respect for what that is. I mean, Jen Statsky, who created the show with Lucia Agnello and myself, was a writer for Jimmy Fallon, and Andrew Law, who's a writer of ours, was a writer for Seth Meyers. So they had been in the trenches and doing it, but to even pretend to do it and to like have to write monologue jokes and sketches
So
and
hard.
all of that stuff, to think about them doing it 5 days a week, every single week, month after month, is so daunting. So it gave me a lot of respect for like the craft of making a daily late night show, a nightly show. But yeah, we do this a lot, that we like give ourselves a very small target. For instance, writing stand up that in season one has to be a little bit mass and a little bit dated for Deborah, but then starts to get more vulnerable and good. To have to calibrate those jokes is a really tricky assignment.
Mm.
And the same goes for writing late night, because in the beginning, you don't want it to be perfect because they don't have their creative collaboration to help them. And so only when they do reconcile? Do they start doing things like celebrity strip poker, which would be a great late night segment? I think it would do well. It feels like it would be viral, and it feels so authentic to Deborah, but they can't get there unless they put their differences aside. But yes, it was a real challenge to think about all the steps of how do you do it well, do it differently, but it falters, it's not perfect. How do you then make it better? What are the things that make it more dishy and fun and Deborah? And doing things like having the mayor of Las Vegas come on as a guest because she knows her and can make that funny, was one of those things. But thank God we have a great writing staff because it took a lot of thought to help figure out what the stages of the late night show would be.
And Megan, in episode 9, I love that confrontation that Kayla has with Deborah and Ava. And she's basically like, you're not appreciating Jimmy, and
Mhm.
you need to step up and you need to let him know that he means something to you because he's crashing out because of the two of you. And it was also such a great example of, Paul was talking earlier about how like Jimmy is always like a little bit in awe of Deborah, but that's not the same for Kayla. So she's able to be confrontational in that way. And how did you find the essence of that just feeling so authentically true to the way that Kayla would do that?
I thought it was so, I loved that scene because I loved being able, like I feel like such protection over Jimmy and Paul that like it was so easy to stand up for them as the him in the show. But also since Paul wasn't in the show that scene,
Yeah.
I actually had the feeling of like missing Paul in that
Oh, that's
scene,
sweet.
having like sort of my safety blanket gone because usually our scenes are together. I love being in the scene with Jean and Hannah, but I was a little bit intimidated. Like I think because I was intimidated with confronting them in a scene, I think, because I've been in scenes with them and stuff, but to confront without Paul was like a little nerve-wracking, and I had to go gorilla
Well, it
mode.
really worked. It really worked.
I had like nerves in the scenes
Yeah.
because I like Paul wasn't there. I've been in scenes with them, but I was supposed to confront them and yell at them, and it was supposed to be really fast paced and like I def I love that there's like a little stuttering in it because like that's how I would be if I was trying to stand up for
Yeah,
like for
yeah.
someone. I'd be like going off and then like maybe stuttering a bit, like you know how you stutter in a fight and then you're like kind of embarrassed. It's so real. It felt so real.
So good. It's one of my favorite scenes Meg's ever done. It's because I think even though she doesn't have the same like respect for Deborah that Jimmy
Yeah.
does, she's still like to do that is like, okay, well, she's really crossing a line in a way,
Yeah.
but in protection of Jimmy. And it was a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
Meg had a lot of dialogue, but a lot of it, and you can tell the moments that Meg improvised because earrings. Yeah, there are a couple moments that are so funny to me because even though I wasn't in the scene, I was at the monitor howling because it was so funny, but also touching. It was I think that scene and what Meg was able to do in that scene really embodies what we try and do with the show, which is like be funny and hard funny, but also heartfelt. And she did it at the same time. And to do that at the same time is so difficult, but I thought she nailed it. I loved that scene.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes of the season already. And, Paul, with Jimmy's crash out, how did you find what you felt like that would look like for him? Because it's literally him driving in a golf cart all the way up to his home, crashing it into the edge, and then also to have that moment where he's at his lowest point and Deborah Vance shows up at his house and you know that she's never been there before.
Yeah. And he's not brushed his teeth. It is like such a crazy moment for Jimmy, but Jimmy really does like, get driven to the brink. And I think one of the things we wanted to do was obviously mirror the moment that Ava drives off the lot and crashes through the gate. And obviously it's very cathartic and she's screaming and drives right through the gate. So we did want to mirror it, but also do it differently. And so Jimmy is fully catatonic. He does narrowly avoid crashing
So
through the gate, but
sad.
then he's just out of it as he drives literally on the freeway home in a golf cart. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with that, and I didn't think that I would actually be driving the golf cart onto Lancashire, but I did.
That's
They're
so
like, okay,
sad.
now we're going to be pulling, so we're going to be in front of the cart, so you're going to be doing it. And I was like, well, they're stunt doubles. Like, yeah, but we need to see your face. So I did do that.
That's
It was
scary.
really scary. Yeah.
Did you block off traffic?
No, there were cars driving. I mean,
Well, I thought they were, I
they
didn't
they
know
were
if
stunt
they were,
cars. They were stunt
yeah.
drivers, but still, they had to drive and then stop.
That's so scary.
It wasn't the chillest moment of the show, but certainly helped me get into a
There's a lot of
nerve-wracked
cars.
state. Yeah. Yeah.
And also in terms of the dance mom of it all this season, which was such a brilliant trajectory for Jimmy and Kayla together because we see them really trying to foster her talent and like bring her out of her shell. And when we first meet her, they're at a restaurant and she's like, "Ooh, bubbly water is too spicy," and they have to kind of bring her from that. But then she goes so far that Jimmy almost has to boof it with cocaine for her. And so how did you find that like their partnership just like really kind of came to the forefront because it does become so much about the two of them just trying to figure this out best they can?
I loved the scenes with Dance Mom. I mean, she's just such an amazing actor. It was so fun to be around her. And I think it was fun having a problem for them to solve together
Yeah, and
where they're on
they
the
couldn't have
same
done it
team.
alone because I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, Jimmy didn't know what Buffet meant. He also didn't know what gator tails were. Like he's like so not in drug culture and party culture, which is so funny to me when Kayla's like, "Go to one party, Jimmy." But yeah, they really need each other to get through that, and it's the kind of thing where typically I think Jimmy wouldn't be administering drugs to a semi-conscious woman, but it's for the show. It's this huge actors on the show. Like the stakes couldn't be higher. So that was a real like pants off moment for them. That was so fun. I looked forward to that the whole season. And that was one of the few scenes that, because it's so choreographed with the cocaine and the stunts she was doing falling into the drink cart and the ice water and all the resets, like that was one scene that we rehearsed. We typically don't rehearse in
Yeah.
advance. We rehearsed the night before for that because it was such a choreographed sequence. So that was one that was very like, we knew every single beat, even though we did discover things in the moment. I think we discovered like putting her little purse over my shoulder in the moment when he storms out to tell Rob she can't go on. Um, but yeah, that was really fun for everybody, and it was
Yeah.
another one that kind of like the plane scene from season three. The crew kept asking to rewatch playback, so I was like, okay, this is something good that the crew wants to watch again.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good.
I love that. Also, one of my favorite moments is Jimmy and Deborah really coming together in that final moment on the live show and knowing that they have to get Ava out of the building in order to save her almost.
Yeah.
And it's that point where when Deborah tells him what she's been propositioned with, if you have to fire Ava or the show disappears and it's over, we don't see the conversation of them concocting the plan, but we know exactly what that looks like. And what do you think that really meant to Jimmy in a moment like that, where it's like a partnership between him and Deborah in a way that he always wants it to be as well?
I think that's exactly what he was hoping for, was to like collaborate with his clients, and that's what he does with Deborah. And I think it's probably also so difficult because for him, he's losing this honestly big paycheck because she won't have the show anymore, and he's a producer on the show and manages the host of the show. But I think because he cares so much about them and their relationship and can see the value that they have for each other, that I do think he was probably really touched, like moved that Deborah was like,
Mhm.
"I'm going to leave the show." I think that was something that maybe, you know, he could have said, well, wait a minute, let's think about it. But I think he's probably so relieved that she was making a decision not about her career and
Mm.
about a relationship that was really like a huge and pivotal moment for the character in her lifetime.
Well, you've both done phenomenal work again on this season. So, congratulations. Thank you so much for talking all about the show. I appreciate it so much.
Of course.
Thank
Thank you.
you for talking to us.